Friends, in the first part of the discussion, Dr. Bajaj pointed out the general aspects of writing in the late 19th century and early 20th century, the concerns that the individual writer had, and how those concerns, were given shape in the form of words, and as she also pointed out, in the form of color, in the form of painting, in the form of a pattern that could have lines, that could have waves, and all those things. And trigger was the basic, key word that she used in the first part of the discussion. So now let's request Dr. Bajaj to say something about her short stories specifically, as well as whatever points you want to share.
Yes, thank you, Professor Prakash. So I just thought that, just a kind of a brief overview really of Woolf also. She was very much a London lady, born in London and born in an upper middle class family in 1882, and was largely homeschooled because at that time really university education was also not available for women. She in fact, attended this ladies department of King's College for a brief period from 1897 to 1901, where she actually learned history, Latin and Greek. And this in a way gave her a good grounding in terms of her knowledge in history, also the classical languages, but she was drawn towards Russian literature during this period. Her father was also a literateur, Leslie Stephen, and was the first editor of the Oxford Dictionary of Biography. So you can see already she is born in the family of a literateur, and the whole library was available to her, where she could read as much as she liked. And she became interested in writing novels that brought into focus the flight of the mind. That's the main thing about her work. And along with her sister Vanessa, who was a post-impressionist painter herself, they began actually an intellectual circle during the 1900s in their Bloomsbury home, and invited these young writers, radical writers and artists to come together for a weekly gathering to debate, aesthetic questions and philosophical questions. And this became sort of a kind of a cultural hub of intellectual activity. A lot of them worked together. Also, most of them were from the King's College, and also they were all very anti-war writers. These intellectuals actually took critical positions on war, politics, and the kind of theoretical exercise that was going on. And they were called the Bloomsbury Group, just as a group, if you wanted to understand. It is these discussions that actually left a deep impact on then Virginia, and by 1907 she had begun writing her first novel, The Voyage Out, which was published in 1915. But this is where she's also written a lot of, the sisters used to bring out this magazine also under the guidance of their father earlier. So her stints at writing, at creativity, at editing as a journalist, all these she started out during the first decade of the 20th century. It is during her discussions in the Bloomsbury group gatherings, that she meets her future husband, Leonard Woolf, and they get married in 1912. Now, Leonard Woolf himself was a Fabian really, and believed in the cause of socialism. Together they started the Hogarth Press that published revolutionary anti-war literature. But much of Virginia Woolf's own works were self-published by this press. So, in the changing world of technological advancements, Woolf was very keen to depict how lives of individuals altered in this transformation. You see, this is the age of scientific advancements, of new kind of things coming to the fore. So she depicted on one hand the fast city life that she was a part of, with the advent of cars, the aircrafts and warfare machinery, etc. But on the other, she also depicted the mind, which had its own pace and pattern, and it had to grapple with these changes. So I think this dichotomy is also very much present in any of Woolf's fiction. That there are these scientific technological advancements through cars and aircrafts, and then the mind, which has its own pace and pattern and doesn't necessarily follow the pace of a car, for instance. So, or this kind of this kind of canon, right? So it has its own pattern, and it has its own pace. So her themes, therefore differ. She very skillfully uses time, the subconscious, the notion of perception, perspective, and all these things then find ample space in her work. In her essay Modern Fiction in 1925 actually, Woolf discussed the very proper stuff of fiction, and she said, and I quote, "It is doubtful whether in the course of the centuries, though we have learned much about making machines, we have learned anything about making literature." Unquote. So you can see that, you see, while scientific advancements are on its own, they have their own pace, and we are making these machines, and we've come very far in making machines and refining them. What about the making of literature? So this in a way connects her with other modernist writers who are very deeply interested in the making of literature as an aesthetic category, how literary works get made, how the writer can work upon them and make them something different, so that the making, that is the creative process, is equally important for her as a writer. And she says that, and I quote, "Examine for a moment an ordinary mind on an ordinary day. The mind receives a myriad impressions, trivial, fantastic, evanescent, or engraved with the sharpness of steel. From all sides they come, an incessant shower of innumerable atoms." Unquote. Now, as you can notice here, she is very much interested in the ordinary mind working on an ordinary day, which receives these myriad impressions, which are trivial, foolish, but also sometimes related to fantasy. They are, and all of these, some things which are very stubborn, and they continue to come back to you, old sort of stubborn memories, fantasies that they keep coming to you. So they have a sense of sharpness of steel, and they come like an incessant shower of innumerable atoms. This is what the mind is according to Woolf, and this is exactly what she tries to bring on the page. And of course it's a very difficult exercise, because the mind keeps moving from one place to the other, keeps digressing from one to the other, and one thing has no connection with the other, and the moment she goes into one thing, she realizes she's gone to a second related thing and a third related thing, till the last thing has no connection with the first. So if she were to talk about the mind in this manner, then what is the significance? Why do that? Why show the mind as our mind really works?
What is your answer? This is a good question you are raising, that it's difficult to control the mind. At the same time, it is important to control the mind, because you are using words.
So, her point of control is the present.
Okay.
She controls the mind by bringing this character back to that initial topic that made her think about all sorts of things that she thought, right? So this is the controlling mechanism, the way she's able to control or bring the mind, bring in the reins of this mind, is by bringing the person back to the point of the present.
In the case of the writer, the stop is made by the word. You use a word, and then the word starts controlling you.
No, I'll tell you, for instance, there is this story which is the mark on the wall. Okay. Right, and she's sitting in her chair and looking at the wall in front of her, and she finds that there is a small mark on the wall above a painting, and she says, what is that mark? She keeps thinking about it. She says, oh, is that a nail that I didn't see? But then she says it's not a nail, because it's too big, it looks too big for a nail. Then she says, is it a hole? And she says, oh, have I not noticed this hole? She says, but it's too big of a hole. And then she says, well, maybe the family who lived before in this house did it. And then she starts talking about this family who lived there, who were very interesting people, who liked to have antique things in the house, and she's totally forgotten about the wall. She's gone to life, and then she comes back, but oh, what is that mark on the wall? And then she's gone again to talk about what life is, what is this kind of life that we are living, right? And then she's reminded, but oh, this can't be the nail, this can't be a hole, it is certainly something else, right? Until and towards the end, the story ends with another person coming in, and the only sentence he says is, goddamn, hell with this war. And then he says, and what is this snail doing up on the wall? And then she says, oh, it's a snail. And that's how the story ends, right? Now, what has gone on in this story is, she's sitting in her armchair and looking at the wall, at a mark on the wall. That's it. In terms of event, there is nothing else that happens in that story.
Suppose I answer it by saying that creativity is at the center of all this, because you require some kind of a trigger, as you said earlier.
Right.
And when the trigger happens, then of course the world is free to talk
Right.
whatever one does.
So the trigger is that mark on the wall that she sees, and that mark on the wall makes her think about 100 other things that she might have thought about, or she thinks of the wall, she thinks of the owners, the previous occupants of the house, or
and all of
about
them
life.
All of them are connections.
They have, there is a sort of an indirect, implicit way in which, you know, they are, so you have to infer really a lot to find that connection. But again, I am you know, brought to that question, why does she want to write this kind of literature? You see, there were the 19th century writers who wanted to write about life as society. Now here society is totally receded in the background. The only time you hear of anything outside is when this second character in the last 2 lines comes in and says that, what is with this war? What is the point of seeing the newspaper? There is never anything new. It's all the war, every day the same news. And that's the only moment you realize that this person is living in a particular time period. And that is Woolf's, you know, that's Woolf's contribution, I think, because, and maybe modernism as a movement is actually not meant for the common people. You know, it's also an assertion of the refinement of the age, where the writer assumes that you know everything about the war. So what should I tell you? The newspaper is full of war details every day, and what should I add to it? So it's almost like this canvas is already ready. It's painted with war. And now she's just trying to add something, whatever she can and whatever she wants to add to this already set canvas. Because, you know, she says that you have to assume a lot. You know, it's not like you can't, you've reached a point in literary activity where you assume that the writer or that the reader already knows reality. And you don't have to talk about that reality. You talk about something else, and just as a slight subtle hint, just throw in a moment of the historicity. So the historical truth is just brought in at one point in a flash, and that's about it, right? But other than that, it's all something which is parallelly going away from the actual historical truth.
And who knows, maybe that parallel thing is a more real thing for certain people, and they are cut off from the reality outside, but they have to live, and one of the engagements with reality is to think on one's own using one's imagination, and that imagination is captured by a nail, by a wall, a hole in the wall, and all those things.
Right, right. Like she says, you know, again from modern fiction, she says that it is not the task of the novelist to convey this varying, this unknown and uncircumscribed spirit, whatever aberrations and complexity it may display. So the idea that you know, there is a sense of whatever, no matter how complex or whatever aberrations are there, the writer should just display them as they are. Again, the point that why is it that the mind is to be given precedence over society at this particular point in time? Is society too daunting for the writer? Why is she choosing to bring to literature and bring to the readers the raw flow of consciousness, or what we say stream of consciousness? How will the reader benefit? Is it that she's not concerned whether it benefits the reader or not? She's not, because she is very much a political person, and she is a very, even if it's not political, I'd say, and she has a kind of an ideology and has a sense of position in society and position in intellectual circles, wherein she's trying to make a point. But what is that point? That why talk about the raw emotions and the raw feelings and the mind in its stream of consciousness? Because I think the answer is the fact that society, I mean, I'm giving my answer to it, that you said, what is your answer? You see, society has reached a point of war already, which means you have surpassed, you've gone ahead, there is no solution that could be found, and therefore you have reached the situation of war. She's surrounded by 2 wars. You see, the Searchlight is a story that was published in published later, but then written in 1940s, so when the Second World War was going. The Mark on the Wall is in 1917 or so, which means again both stories against the background of the war. Which means that if there are no answers and solutions that are possible in reality, the writer has to turn back to the mind to form connections between things among various memories in order to be able to churn something up and churn something new. That answers are to be found, and they are going to be found through the mind. But perhaps our structures of thought are very crystallized in this moment, and therefore the answers are not available today. And hence the war. The war is the last solution. That all diplomatic talks have failed. If all talks have failed, all solutions have failed, and therefore you've reached the brink where you feel there is no other way but to fight the enemy physically. But I think it is the assertion that the mind is still capable of finding those answers, and you don't have to resort to the physical moment of the war, where you think that the only way you are going to find is to go back to your bestial self, how we began in the first place. If you wanted to fight an enemy, then we'd fight the enemy by war. So all those years of evolution that brought you to a place where you could have talks with people and find answers and solutions, they have been tested and they have been put to naught, so that you have gone to your first instinct of going in a war situation, right? And I think that the answer that she's trying to give here through these stories is that it is very important to tap the mind, and that set conventions and set frameworks which have come from the 19th century are no more offering the solution in the 20th century to the citizens who have to deal with this new phenomena of war, something that 19th century didn't have to, right? So the 20th century has to deal with the problem of war at a more international level, where the entire world is involved in a war, and it is not even a religious war. It is a war which is based on money.
Not a nationalist war.
Is not a nationalist war. It is an imperialist war, where everybody is vying for colonies, for more markets and more space and money. And so the idea that the old answers no more work today requires new answers, but new answers will come when we change the questions itself, because we are too determined by the old questions and the old answers. I think what she's trying to do is, through the ramblings of characters and through this experimentation with the stream of consciousness, she's trying to break set structures and make it more fluid, so that there is more potential for something new to emerge. So I mean, that is my answer to why she goes into...
But anyway, the way you have explained the entire phenomena, that something very negative and destructive is happening at the world level, and people are fighting for markets, and they are fighting for where to sell and where to buy, and are motivated by profit.
Right.
At that point of time, the human mind can work creatively and can experiment with imaginative skills, and that's what she's doing. So in a way, her short stories and her writing in general, that becomes a comment on the uselessness, the futility of fighting between nations and between markets. So that's the right kind of answer.
But would you call it a sense of escapism?
Escaping from that reality, which is very daunting and which doesn't make any sense. Why not?
But most modernists, are into a sense of rejection of this world, but there is always a helplessness in them vis-a-vis the answers.
That is because those people do not think of the answers at all. They think of the facts as they stand, and they say life is futile. This person, the creative person, the writer, the woman, she thinks that playfulness is the answer, playfulness of imagination is the answer, and that through that actually you are making a comment on the existence of violence, existence of injustice and inequality. So she is the wife of a socialist, and she is the daughter of an active intellectual in the 19th century, and she has her own ways to express her dissent. Her writing, I think, entirely full of dissent, and the dissent is about the existing, what I call, social relations. So that's my theoretical answer to the question that you posed, and I think you have a great insight to share with the audience, with the viewers.
Right. So again, again, this story, The Wall on the Mark, brings this point out again, that how readily, she says, the narrator says, how readily our thoughts swarm upon new objects. So again, the mark on the wall becomes this point of reference, or this point of return for the writer. But what I'm trying to also say here is that the finding, the search for something new is something which is very evident in Woolf, and I don't think for that reason that she is one of those helpless writers, because and yes, escape, and often I would say that, then why the romantics were called escapists, because they were trying to, build an alternate world for themselves, which was an idealistic romantic world, and to get away from, the din of the city, so to speak. So what is it that is different in, say, Woolf? Because she enters the mind, and the area of consciousness, or she enters the mind as a kind of an escape, or whether she willingly wants to escape or not, right? So that is one of the things, that why is escapism a good thing or not. The second thing is also that it is through the mind that she is trying to also, channelize other things. For instance, she is talking about the mind of a woman, right, and a mind of a woman who is trapped in a bourgeois circle. She doesn't like being, she's very, so the mark on the wall is about a woman who's sitting in her armchair and just thinking and going on thinking about things, etc. Again, there is a sense of boredom which is attached to that life, and a kind of a criticism of that boredom, that why is it that she's constrained in this sphere? Why is it that she has no active role to play?
That separates her from the modernists.
Yeah.
Modernists indulge in boredom.
They indulge in boredom, and yes, they indulge in their own social position.
Yes.
She is critical of her own position. For instance, she criticizes this whole act that, in the story, The Searchlight, there is a searchlight which is trying to find an enemy aircraft at night. So the searchlight keeps falling on various buildings, and it falls on one of the buildings, which was an estate mansion, later converted into a club for elite, where all these people get together. They've had their dinner, they are having, they're having their drinks and coffee, and they're chatting, a play is about to ensue, etc. So in between this moment, there is one of the elite ladies, who tells her story of the grandfather, right? Now, you cannot just think about this club situation and compare it with the scene outside. Outside, there is an enemy plane that is going about looking for, and a searchlight, that is aircraft, that is looking for an enemy aircraft, and there is a club that is having a party inside. So there is a sense of criticism, there is a sense of larger criticism that you see here of this section of society, and Virginia Woolf's own stand, where she's stuck in this bourgeois circle, and I think that is her criticism of her own position in society, sets her apart from other modernist writers who in fact indulge and wallow in their own indulge or wallow in their
the point that you have extended further into the political position that she has, and she has a political position, is that she is anti-war, and if you are anti-war, then actually you are anti-war industry, and it's
right,
anti-war industry which is reaping all the profits.
Right.
So if she goes against that kind of a war, and she thinks of the life of the individual as a mind, as a memory, as a creative thing, I think that she offers a very important answer to the question posed.
Right. And she's often thinking about these philosophical questions, for instance, of life, which is obviously...
Can you take just 2 sentences to finish?
Yes. So if I were to finish here, then I'd just say that Virginia Woolf is not just a modernist writer tagged as a stream of conscious writer. We need to understand why stream of consciousness. Why should we become aware of how the mind works? Because the mind holds, according to her, the key to your own potential, and the answers that you have been looking for, of questions, they are to be found in the mind itself. So there is a lot of emphasis on the mind for that reason, and also on the emphasis, there is emphasis on the creative writer and the creative practice as such. That is, she says that a lot of people live this kind of laborious life, but how many of them lead a poetic life? So in a way, she is trying to emphasize the poetic life that gives a sense of direction and perspective to things which otherwise remain raw and varied and futile. So there is infusion in the reworking of the banal details of life, in her reworking of the banal details of life. There is a perspective and an ideological position that we find, which is to be inferred because it is implicitly present. Finally, the last point is that she is a bourgeois writer who is equally critical of the surrounding that she is a part of, and that and a feminist and being a feminist helps there, because she's already going through another kind of control mechanism and oppression that she has to deal with. So I think in that sense this sets her apart from other modernist writers as well.
So friends, Dr. Richa Bajaj has talked about the problems that a writer faces in the modern world, and she has her own answers to give. So I think that's the kind of thing that we require to think about, and that we require to resolve on and take a position. Thank you.